Welcome back, everybody. Coast to Coast, This Week in America. Great to have you with us on the program. Sasha Chanoff is the founder and executive director of Refuge Point, a humanitarian organization that finds lasting solutions for refugees in life-threatening situations. He faced a life and death decision during a U.S.-sponsored rescue operation in the Congo to evacuate massacre survivors and ultimately led to starting Refuge Point. He previously consulted for the UN Refugee Agency and worked for the International Organization for Migration across Africa in refugee resettlement and relief operations. He's the recipient of the Charles Bronfman Humanitarian Award, Harvard University Center for Public Leadership's Gleitzman International Activist Award, and a 2015 White House Champion of Change, an author, along with his father, the acclaimed author David Chanoff. Sasha's the author of From Crisis to Calling, Finding a Moral Center in the Toughest Decisions. Sasha, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us on the show.
Thank you, Rick, so much. It's great to be here.
There are so many interesting things to talk about, and let's start with that experience that literally changed your life. You are a young aid worker. You're working in the Congo in early 2000. Talk about that experience, and I understand from reading the book, this is something you still sort of go back in your mind and play it over to make sure that you did the right thing and what you put at risk by trying to do the right thing. Explain the circumstances.
Yeah, the decision point certainly changed my life. I was based in Nairobi, Kenya, and my boss, David Durthick at the time, called me into his office and handed me a list with 112 names on it and said he was sending me into the Congo on this U.S. rescue mission. The goal was to evacuate these 112 people who had survived massacres. These were people of the Tutsi tribe, and that tribe had been maligned in the Congo, and the president of the Congo at the time had said that these people are the enemy and need to be hunted down and exterminated. These were innocent civilians. My boss handed me this list, told me he was sending me in with a colleague named Sheikh Ali, and we were to go in and get these people out. He gave us explicit instructions not to include anybody else on our evacuation flight beyond those 112. If we did, he said, the whole mission would blow up. We would sabotage the mission because it was a complex situation. Congo was at war. Stick to the list and we'd do fine. Try to include anybody else and we wouldn't get anybody out, and those 112 would die there.
I was going to say, that you mentioned the fact that it was a treacherous situation. This was not a friendly government. This was a government that you sort of caught yourself a few times as you're talking and realizing these people aren't my friends. They're not there to help me. These people work for a government that's really, we need to watch these people. We need to watch what we do, what we say.
No, that's true. Congo was aflame with violence. The U.S. government and the international community had put enough pressure on the Congolese government to allow us to come in. But in fact, they had bugged our phones. They were watching us very carefully. And we felt that there might be many different ways that they would try to sabotage this final rescue operation.
On the surface, it sounds rather simple. And of course, it does on paper until you start seeing these people have names, and the names all have faces, and they all have family members. You've got 112. But then you find out there's a group that if they don't get out with you in this group, they're going to die.
Yeah, in the safe haven in the Congo, we found the 112 people there. We registered them, but then my colleague and I were pointed to this tent and told that we had to go in and see the new people in this safe haven who had just come in that tent. And I said, we can't go in, we can't take anybody else. But my colleague, this woman Sheikha, said, I'm going in. And she started walking towards the tent, and I followed her, and we stepped inside. And in that tent, we saw there were 32 widows and orphans who had been put in a prison camp. They were innocent civilians, but again, these people were being attacked and massacred. They had been put in a prison camp where many of their own family members had lost their lives. They were barely alive. They looked emaciated and traumatized. And we knew if we left them there, they would perish. But we knew if we tried to take them, we were risking the lives of the 112 people. My colleague Sheikha leaned over to a little girl in that tent who was holding a doll and said, what's your doll's name? And all of a sudden, the doll's eyes popped open, and we realized it was a tiny infant that was more dead than alive. And it was very clear these people wouldn't survive. And then my colleague Sheikha and I went back to our hotel later that evening where we were based and started arguing.
The book is called From Crisis to Calling, Finding Your Moral Center in the Toughest Decisions, written by Sasha Chanoff and his father, David Chanoff. The book's available all across the country. It is an excellent book. Time's going to go by way too quickly in the program today, and there are so many areas to talk about. And it's interesting. You describe very graphically as you're driving to the protection center for the first time. And it's sort of as you're reading, the pages come alive and you can see all of these people coming towards you, for many of them knowing this could be my last chance to get out of here, to survive.
Yeah, I had been working in refugee issues since I'd graduated from college about 6 years earlier, but I was now in the middle of a situation, not on the outside of it, in the middle of it where I was actually part of trying to decide on what to do, and this would directly impact these people's lives. They had survived barely, and we knew that when they saw us, they would be ecstatic because they'd know there'd be a last rescue flight out. This was the final flight in a series of a number of rescue flights out.
The book is called From Crisis to Calling, Finding Your Moral Center in the Toughest Decision. Sasha Chanoff with us on the program at CHANOFF. The website is chanoff.com. The book's available all across the country. Link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. It's so heartbreaking as you're reading this up to the point where you have to make a decision and you're being told, no, you can't do this. And there's this debate going on with several of you whether we actually can do it or not, because the consequences are not, we're just going to upset somebody. We're going to get people killed if this blows up in our face. And speaking with faces, you're doing interviews and you're talking to people in the center, and you say they have this, but what about me look on their face. How do you handle that? You know what you're there to do. You know what the job is that you need to do, yet suddenly these are not names on a list. These are people standing in front of you that are worried about themselves, their spouses, their children. How do you deal with that?
It's the most bizarre thing to be in a situation in your life where you have to make the decisions that impact others. I think that one of the ways you try to handle that is to put yourself in the other person's shoes. I mean, very simply, to treat people just like you would want to be treated. My own family came to the U.S. as refugees 100 years ago. I think many people in America have that kind of background. But we need to consider that the people in front of us are just like us. They want their families to survive. They want to see their kids grow up and have positive and successful futures. And so if we put ourselves in their shoes, that can help us understand what to do. I mean, with those widows and orphans, my sense was that after we had seen them face to face, we couldn't turn away. But our boss had told us, you cannot take them. So Sheikha and I argued about it all night, and she finally convinced me that we had to try. She said, Sasha, we're humanitarians. We're here on the ground now. This is up to us. And it helped me understand and define kind of who I was as a person, and led to starting this organization, Refuge Point, which now finds refugees in life-threatening situations and helps them get to safety.
What's interesting, as you make the decision, okay, we're going to take everybody, there's only so much room on the plane. How did you go about just the logistics of moving everybody?
We finally decided we had to take them. We called our boss. He got very upset with us, but then he was quiet and he thought about it and he said, well, get the U.S. ambassador's approval and try it. We got the U.S. ambassador's approval, but then we realized that the plane that we had rented only had 126 seats on it, and we had far more people than that. So on our last night, we realized that we could change the birth dates of all the children. So I spent hours looking at all the 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds and 2-year-olds and making them under 2 so that they could sit on the laps of adults. And in that way, we freed up enough space on our flight to get the people out.
Do you talk about the refugees in the Congo, and in the book, From Crisis to Calling, Finding Your Moral Center in the Toughest Decisions, you actually talk about several and what has happened to them. It's interesting because as we watch and we see this on the news, we read the headlines, and it's a very superficial look, and it's like far away, and boy, what can we do? Talk about some of the success stories which you describe in the book.
Well, when I stepped into that tent, there was a teenage boy standing there with a child on his back. And I went up to the boy and said, what's your name? And he didn't say anything. And someone else came over and said, he doesn't talk anymore. His name is Daniel. I can speak for him. Daniel had been traumatized. He'd been tortured. He had seen people die in horrific ways. He had simply stopped talking. He came to the U.S. through this rescue operation, and he started running in high school. And he found that he was not only good at it, but it helped him sleep, and it helped to keep away the nightmares. He got a scholarship to college. He became a 5-time national running champion in college. We found that his own parents had survived, and we reunited them with him. He went on to pursue a master's degree in psychology, to coach track. He works in a hospital now. He's a U.S. citizen who's raising his family here. And I have seen situation after situation and person after person who come to the U.S. and have a chance to rebuild their lives and do that and then become inspiring people. And I feel like that strengthens who we are as a nation. And it certainly gives you this hope for humanity. It gives you a sense that even people who face the worst, most horrific things in the world can come through that and go on to inspire others. And that's what inspires me. That's what led me to start Refuge Point. And that's what drives me every day. That if you can play a small role in helping one person to her life, you're doing something. And so that's what we've built with this organization. Refuge Point is a way to do that.
And as you're talking about that, I see the smile on your face, the fact that you feel like we actually are, one by one, making a difference. Sasha Chanoff, our guest on the program, From Crisis to Calling, Finding a Moral Center in the Toughest Decisions, is the book that we're talking about. In the book, you talk a lot about empathy. In fact, you've got a chapter talking about empathy. Talk about that and how important that really is in moral leadership to be able to have that quality.
I think having a sense of other people and what their needs are and how our decisions will impact other people is a critical part of who we are as human beings. We have, there's a sociologist, James Q. Wilson, whom we quote in the book, who says that the moral sense is not a strong beacon light. It is rather a small candle flame, flickering and sputtering in the strong winds of power and passion, greed and ideology. But brought close to the heart and cupped in one's hands, it dispels the darkness and warms the soul. I think that's an example of the importance of empathy in our lives. We can overlook it. We have many different factors that influence us when we make decisions, but we overlook it at the peril of reinforcing a shallower sense of ourselves. And so I think it's a core piece of who we are as human beings.
In the book, From Crisis to Calling, Finding a Moral Center in the Toughest Decisions, you've got 5 principles to follow in doing the right thing, in moral leadership. And be prepared, open your eyes, confront yourself, know yourself, and take courage. Step 1, be prepared. You admitted right in the beginning, well, you had no idea what to do. You were not prepared for the situation, yet you were able to come out and do the right thing. Talk about that process, because it was, as I read, an evolution for you to get to the conclusion that you got to.
It absolutely was. I wasn't prepared. I was very fortunate to have this woman, Sheikha Ali, who was there with me, who I would say was more prepared for this. I was 28 years old. I was young. I'd never done anything like this before. I think my boss chose me to go in along with Sheikha because he felt I might be able to stand up to her if she wanted to take other people, and he knew we couldn't take other people. But she argued with me, and in arguing with me, she helped me to kind of understand who I was. My own family had come to the U.S. as refugees. I ultimately felt the same way that she did, that we couldn't turn our backs on these people once we had seen them and come face to face with them. But I think finally what it took was also a sense, a kind of a need to step in and say, I'm going to do this even though it's what I've been told we can't do. So there was the 5th principle we talk about is courage, and the need to take courage to do what you feel is the right thing to do. And these principles are applicable to everybody in different situations. Of course, my situation was unique, but the book goes on to talk about 8 other leaders who have also faced situations that have helped them to define who they are and have influenced their actions in their lives.
Yeah, the process you went through, you can draw parallels to the business world, maybe not the consequences that you were facing and the hundreds of people in the center there, the camp, were facing literally a life and death situation. A couple minutes left in the program. You touch on a crucible moment. And that's interesting because all of us would like to think, yeah, we're leaders. But you mentioned the elements there. You mentioned the courage that's involved. Sometimes you have to do things that maybe on the surface are not at that present time are not all that popular. Talk about the crucible moment. You face that, and a lot of great leaders have to face that.
I think, Rick, it's not just great leaders. I think everybody, this, again, my situation was unique, but people will face situations where we have to make decisions that impact other people's lives in some way. And so I think this book is not just for leaders, it's for everybody who's in a situation to make a hard decision at one point or another. This is just a human a thing that we encounter as human beings that be confronted with decisions that will impact other people. And so for me, it was a crucible moment in the sense that it was a defining point in my life. That making that decision and confronting that situation helped me understand who I was as a person and helped open up a pathway to what I wanted to do, which was to create an organization, Refuge Point, that would go on to find other refugees in life-threatening situations. And I think it's very easy for us to be stuck in our lives, to be working and studying and raising our families and keep our eyes down around what we know and what's in front of us. But if we look up and we open our eyes to situations around us, we might have opportunities to be confronted with situations that will help us understand who we are at a deeper level and help define what we can do in the world. And for me personally, I feel this incredible sense of satisfaction and meaning in the work that I do. But I think we can all find that, and many of us have found that. But this book, I think, can help define how to find that kind of meaning through these decision points.
That's so interesting because for many of us, just common, ordinary people, we are facing that crucible moment as we're watching the news and we're seeing what's happening. We can make a decision rather than to sort of rationalize there's nothing I can do. What you're saying is there are things that you can do through political leaders, through church organizations, through Refuge Point, what you do. We really, just because we're a single voice doesn't mean that we can't combine with other people and not get something accomplished.
And it's actually change starts with an individual. When you or I or others can find the thing that we're passionate about and that we're interested in and that it makes meaning for us, then we can create change around us. I've found in starting Refuge Point that a community has been built around the organization that has the same intentions, that wants to protect people in the most life-threatening situations. And so it has helped to, I would say, give a lot of people meaning in their lives. But also, I would say we're not just facing a crucible moment as individuals, but as a country right now, I think we're facing a crucible moment in terms of determining who we are as a nation and what we stand for.
A minute or so left in the program, and we could talk for hours about this. Do we fully understand the problem? Again, I keep coming back to we watch for a couple minutes or we don't watch when it's on the news because I guess maybe we don't want to face the reality that these are people, these are men, women, and children who very well could lose their lives. In some cases, they're displaced because of policies of our government being caught in the politics in the Middle East, that type of thing. Do we fully understand the situation, the problem, the crisis we face? And can we have, again, a discussion about this?
I don't think we understand it deeply enough. I think here's the core of it, is that people who are refugees have fled from their homes, and they want nothing more than exactly what you and I want. They want to see their children grow and be successful. They want to be safe. They want to have normal lives, and yet they don't. More people in the world are displaced than any time in history, more than 65 million. And the average amount of time someone's a refugee is 20 years now. These are people just like you and me, and we have to find ways to give them opportunities to support themselves and become contributing members of society, just like Daniel in the book.
And you can get the information because you're doing this at Refuge Point. The book is called From Crisis to Calling, Finding Your Moral Center in the Toughest Decisions, written by our guest on the program, Sasha Chanoff, and his father, David, co-writer on the book. And it was interesting that, I'm going to take another 30 seconds here. I've taken a number of 30 seconds. This will be maybe the last 30 seconds. But your dad was really with you, right? During this process, you were emailing back home because your mother was Finnish and you emailed it in Finnish so they wouldn't understand basically what the people of the Congo, what you were saying. But your dad's been with you from the beginning. This was logical to have him assist you because he really knew what you were going through.
Yeah, this was such I think, just wonderful, fun, exciting, and meaningful thing that I was able to write this book with my dad, who was with me, in a sense, right when I was in the Congo as I was writing back and forth to him. And when I came out and started telling him about this, and then started doing the other work that I did, I think it built a deeper relationship between us. It led him and my mom to doing other things. I came back from Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya some months later in working with the Sudanese Lost Boys, and I showed my mom and dad videos of them, and they started volunteering to help this group of orphans from South Sudan, and they say that they inherited something from me rather than the other way around in terms of their need and interest in supporting South Sudanese and other refugees now. But it's been just a pleasure to do this with my dad, and he and I talk daily about this book and about a lot of things that have to do with my work and life.
It is an excellent, a powerful, and important book, From Crisis to Calling, Finding a Moral Center in the Toughest Decisions, available wherever books are sold all across the country. Sasha Chanoff, co-writer, with us on the program today. You can link on directly to the website and get information by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Sasha, it's been great to have you with us on the program. Thank you so much for being here.
Rick, what a pleasure. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. You're listening to This Week in America. All the information on Sasha in the book From Crisis to Calling, Finding a Moral Center in the Toughest Decisions at our website, thisweekinamerica.us.